Hey y'all, happy Wednesday. Welcome back. Um, this is the last set of notes that we're going to be looking at over this unit before we get ready for testing. This is a little bit heavier on videos and less of me talking. So I do want y'all to continue to pay attention. There's some really good information in these videos. One of them might be a little bit loud, so be ready to adjust the TV volume if that's the case. But let's get started. Hopefully I can give you all some time to start working on the review sheet that you picked up on your way into class. So again, make sure that you have your spirals out, something to take notes with, and let's get started. All right, we're going to skip the bell ringer. Reminder of the extra credit opportunity Friday, be a movie. It's not going to be available on Schoology. We're watching it in my classroom Friday after school. If you complete this, you'll get a low daily grade replaced and some bonus points on your test. So please check your grades. Make sure that you're doing everything you can to maximize your potential in the classroom. All right, so we're looking at some working conditions of the laborers and how the labor unions developed during this period and the government's attitude towards labor unions. We're going to look at who the government is supporting. All right, so labor problems we've talked about um, pretty thoroughly. It is not safe jobs. You're being paid very poorly. You're working long hours, especially now that there's electric light. You're able to start to have night shifts. Bosses are only concerned about making money and will abuse their employees. Again, with lots of immigrants coming in, millions of immigrants moving into the nation, if you're not willing to work for low pay, someone else is. And also, we've noticed that people are coercing employees or immigrants to vote for political candidates that are going to support the business first, not necessarily the workers. All right. Also, you're going to need to write down labor unions. Labor is the other word for workers, and they're coming together, forming a union so that they can be more powerful. I mean, even think of our unofficial national motto, and that out of many, one, that with these many workers, they can create a single union and have a lot more power on a national level. Right, so write down the definition here that it's an organized association of workers formed to protect and improve their rights and interests. So the workers' rights and interests. What are their goals? They're simple: get better pay, work less hours, and have safer working conditions. Again, this is the official definition that we're looking at. If you see this on a test, can you understand what we mean when we say organized workers, right? And that they're improving their rights and what those rights are. Right, there's a couple of different labor unions: the American Federation of Labor, the Knights of Labor. They'll come up in some of these videos that we're going to watch that demonstrate what happens when these large unions are able to impact their associated businesses on a national level. All right, so again, think if this is a test and I was going to have you select all that apply, how would you describe working conditions in the Gilded Age? Right? Long hours, coercive employers, low pay, considerate employers, or safe working conditions. Also, what were labor unions developed for? Are they trying to save money for the big business? Are they trying to create more jobs? Are they trying to protect the rights of workers? Or are they trying to protect the rights of employers? So, why would workers get together to try and change things? Right? It's C, they're trying to protect their rights. some ways that these unions are able to impact employers to get changes. The big one is strikes, where groups of employees, entire companies of employees, are going to refuse to work until conditions are met. And these businessmen are focused on making money. And if nobody's going to go to work and work for them, they can't produce, they can't make money. So these can be effective. Ultimately, some of these labor unions are going to try and negotiate what's called a closed shop. So a business would make a deal with a labor union that they would only hire union workers. Right? So a closed shop, you have to be a member of that union. There's also going to be something known as union shops. That gives you about 30 days to join a union once you are hired. All right, so we're going to review a few of the strikes. We're going to do these through videos. They are helpful. Please watch them. The Pullman strike has to do with railway workers wanting better rights. But remember, the railway is how this nation is transporting most of its goods and some of its people. So what happens if you can shut down entire railway systems? Now, the result of this, president is going to side with business and send troops in to break the strike. Again, this is affecting more than just the Pullman luxury cars. It's affecting every single train in the nation.
Whew. Okay, I didn't really drink toilet water, but if I needed to, I could stick.
What's up?
You know what, y'all? Let's ditch ads for a bit. Give me a second.
What's up, beautiful people? Today we're going to be taking a look at the Pullman strike of 1894. Now, usually when you think about a strike, you probably think about a conflict between workers, usually in a union, versus the management of a particular company. Remember, throughout the Gilded Age, labor and management battled over wages and working conditions, with workers organizing local and national unions and/or directly confronting business leaders. The Pullman strike of 1894 was a nationwide railroad strike between the American Railway Union versus the Pullman Company, other railroad companies, and the federal government. This big showdown between labor and management took place in Pullman, Illinois, a small town 12 miles outside of Chicago. Pullman was a model company town built by the Pullman Palace Car Company, a company that built sleeping cars for the railroads. Pullman cars were super luxurious railway cars that allowed people that could afford it to travel in comfort across the country. Hashtag 19th century baller life. The Pullman Palace Car Company had a unique setup. In Pullman, the company owned the land, the homes workers lived in, and all of the businesses. The point of this setup was largely to ensure a dependable and productive workforce for the company. If workers lived where they work, the company could increase efficiency, regulate worker behavior, and try to prevent any labor protests. The bottom line is, the point of a company town was to maximize the profits. At Pullman, thousands of workers and their families lived in houses rented from the Pullman Company, and the company town did provide pretty decent housing, schools, a local theater, and other amenities, but the rents were high and there were rules in place that restricted behavior. For example, alcohol was forbidden, and the company had people who kept an eye on workers' behavior to report any potential problems to the company. Now, something important happened in the country in 1893. 'Cause there'll be hard times. Following the Panic of 1893, the economy took a dump, leading to companies going bankrupt, bank failures, and massive layoffs. In response, the Pullman Company laid off thousands of workers and cut wages for the rest of the workers by 25% or more. However, in spite of these cuts, the rents in Pullman were not reduced and workers were not allowed to move to more affordable housing outside of the town. If you tried to leave the company town, you would be fired. Now, you will probably never be able to guess what's about to go down next. Workers attempted to negotiate with owner George Pullman for better wages, shorter work days, and better living conditions, but his response was basically this: nope. He refused to negotiate with the workers. On May 11th, 1894, Pullman workers walked off the job, starting the Pullman Railroad strike. Now, this strike was a wildcat strike, or rather an unannounced strike without the official approval of the union leadership. But in order to increase the support for the cause, the workers called on the American Railway Union, ARU, led by Eugene Debs, for additional support. And the ARU became involved in the events in Pullman. Initially, the head of the ARU, Eugene Debs, was worried about striking during an economic depression and called for a postponement of the strike, but the workers of Pullman refused to back down, and Debs threw the support of the American Railway Union behind the Pullman workers. To put pressure on the company, the American Railway Union in June of 1894 called for a nationwide boycott of Pullman railroad cars. The American Railway Union members refused to work on any train that had a Pullman car attached, and by June, rail traffic throughout much of the nation had come to a halt as over 100,000 workers joined in the boycott in support of the Pullman workers. Since trains were the primary way that goods were moved across the nation, this meant the Pullman strike became a national issue. During the strike, skirmishes and violence broke out between workers and local police, and on occasion, property was destroyed. Which brings us back to this slide. Why do other railroad companies and the federal government get involved? Like most of the Gilded Age presidents, Grover Cleveland was not sympathetic to the cause of workers and got a federal judge to order an end to the strike because it was interfering with interstate commerce, or trade between states. The Cleveland administration also claimed that the strike was disrupting the delivery of the U.S. mail, and delivery of the mail was one of the duties of the federal government. And although workers did not target railway cars that carried the mail, they knew this would give the government an excuse to intervene in the strike. Mail distribution was impacted in strike-affected regions. The Attorney General, Richard Olney, a guy who had a close relationship with the railway industry, used this as justification for the first ever injunction to block a strike. An injunction that he would get in early July of 1894. Adding to all this drama is the fact that the governor of Illinois refused to request that President Cleveland send in federal troops to stop the strike. In fact, he wrote the president informing him that reports of violence were exaggerated and warned that real violence would occur if soldiers were sent in or if the federal government intervened. Nevertheless, a federal injunction was issued against the strike. And basically what this means is the court ordered the workers to end the strike and to go back to work. Grover Cleveland is quoted as famously saying,
"If it takes the entire Army and Navy of the United States to deliver a postcard in Chicago, that card will be delivered."
I bet you can guess what's about to go down next. As for the workers, most ignored the injunction, and in response, Grover Cleveland sent a few thousand troops to Illinois to enforce the injunction and to force the workers back on the job. In early July, violence erupted between protesters and federal troops. Clashes occurred between the workers and the troops. Rail cars were destroyed, and in the end, around 30 people were killed. Eventually, the federal troops and local police gained control over the railroad yards, and the strike was stopped. The union was disbanded, and many of the leaders, including Eugene Debs, were arrested and sentenced to jail for defying the federal injunction to stop the strike. The experience of the strike being broken up by the U.S. military and his arrest had a big impact on Eugene Debs. He would leave jail feeling like the capitalist system was unfair to workers and the only way to bring about meaningful progress was through radical change. And he went on to become a founder of the Socialist Party of the United States. Debs became very politically involved, running for president a few times, once even from jail, where he received nearly 1 million votes. As for the rest of the workers, the Pullman Company only allowed workers back who resigned from the union, and workers who refused were blacklisted, preventing them from working in the industry ever again. So finally, why is it important we know about the Pullman strike? The Pullman strike was the first time an injunction was issued by the federal government to break up a strike. So not only did workers face extremely difficult working conditions during the laissez-faire era of the Gilded Age, but also hostility from corporations, hostility from the federal government, and hostility from the courts. Hiring scabs, Pinkerton guards, blacklist also regularly occurred. And the last thing about the Pullman strike, and perhaps the most amazing, remember Mr. "I'm gonna get the mail delivered no matter what it takes"? Well, amid the crisis, President Cleveland and Congress created a new national holiday, Labor Day. So while he is sending out troops to get workers to go back to work, he signs into law a national holiday to celebrate the contributions of American labor. You know, things that we take for granted like the 8-hour workday, safe working conditions, sick pay. You can't make this stuff up. Thank you so much for
All right, y'all. So enjoy your Labor Day on Monday, uh, resulting of a Pullman strike. Next, we're going to look at the Homestead strike. We did briefly maybe mention this when we were talking about Andrew Carnegie Steel. And steel workers are trying to form a union, and the government is going to support Carnegie Steel and not the workers.
2,000 men barricade themselves inside the Homestead plant. Causing steel production to grind to a halt. Carnegie Steel's chairman, Henry Frick, is in no mood to negotiate. Under pressure to quell the revolt, Frick brings in the Pinkertons, a mercenary army capable of outgunning the U.S. military. And their presence threatens to be the spark that lights the powder keg.
Frick thought to himself, when the workers see the Pinkertons, when they see that I'm not going to back down, they will back down. He thought a show of strength, a show of resolve was all that was needed. And that would be the end. He badly miscalculated.
Hold your ground. Stay calm. Stay calm.
We're here to take possession of this property.
I suggest you turn around and go home. You're not getting in.
If you do not stand aside, we will mow every one of you down.
Blood of innocent men will be on your hands.
Tear down this barricade!
Keep your ground!
When the fighting stops, 9 Carnegie Steel workers lie dead, while countless others sustain severe injuries. But they manage to hold their ground. until Pennsylvania's governor sends in the state militia to finally restore order.
All right, next we have the Haymarket riot. All right. Again, workers pushing for rights, simple asks. Factory workers want to work an 8-hour workday. Result, the police, funded by the government, break the strike and the late nights of labor fall apart. All right, take a moment, y'all. Stand up. Like for real, for real. Put your pencils down, stand up, and we're going to ask a question. What do the outcomes of the Pullman strike, the Homestead strike, and the Haymarket strike have in common? All right, so our STEM, what we're going to start with, the outcomes of the Pullman strike, Homestead strike, and Haymarket strike are similar because who does the government always side with? All right, so y'all sit down, share amongst your table groups, and be able to share with the teacher or the substitute if they do call on you to be able to share out with the class. How are these similar? Who is the government supporting? All right, the reason these labor unions were not as successful as we had hoped that they would be is because government protected big business during the Gilded Age and still today. That's an important thing to recognize as we see it in our current state of affairs. And who has more money, the workers or the businessmen? Who is able to give money to politicians to support their causes to make sure that when the time comes, the government has their back? It's businesses. Again, we still see this today, so we need to recognize how it's affected us in our past, how we've grown and changed, what kind of rights these workers were able to achieve, and then what rights are people looking for still today. All right, and also think of which of de Tocqueville's 5 values is most closely related to government's intervention in business. All right, real quick, if you had to just keep it in the most simple terms, what was the government's attitude towards labor unions? Did they like them and support their desires? Or did they see them as a nuisance, someone to be stopped? All right, a big part of the STAR test and our tests throughout this year are going to be our ability to analyze political cartoons. Okay, so we're going to do that because political cartoons, they tell us something. If you can remember this acronym TELLS, it'll help you out. So look at the title so you know what you're looking at. Find out what they're exaggerating. All right, what is ironic? See if anything is labeled, actual text written on any of the items. And then what does this image symbolize? Right? What is the analogy? Right? Is it a fight? Is it a discussion? So what does this political cartoon tell us? And so we're going to look for a title. The Tournament of Today, a set to between labor and monopoly. All right, so we have that. What are they exaggerating? This looks like a pretty massive exaggeration. All right, we have a golden clad horse and knight in armor against a poor laborer, right? His animal is named Poverty. His hammer, Strike. Right, and let's look at this ironclad warrior he's battling. These are the monopolies, the massive businesses. All right, he's got the press or the newspapers behind them. We have this little feather of arrogance. The capitalists are reserved in the nice spots while the laborers over here are in the dirty spots. Right. So how fair of a fight are we looking at? Not a fair fight. Okay, so being able to look at this and understand that the worker and laborer had no chance in the battle against the monopoly. Right? It was not a fair fight to begin with. All right. Remember that we are going to need to study this information for our test. No, this slide is not correct. You're not testing tomorrow. All right, Thursday, we will complete the review, try and maybe do some review games, and get you prepped for this test. The test is going to be on Friday. That means you need to bring your laptop with you Friday. I'll have a handful of loaners, but this is the exact same setup as we did when we took the beginning of year test at the beginning of last week. So again, you should have your review sheets with you. I want you to work as a class, go through notes, use any resource that you can to try and get the answers to these. I'm going to encourage you to not just go to Google and look for the first answer. It does not mean it's the most correct answer for this unit, and you might end up writing way more than you need to. All right, you all got this. I appreciate you, and I'll talk to you soon.